Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We've got lots of people to talk to and lots of things to discuss. The GM meetings. I know that was it Palm Beach, I believe. There was stuff coming out of there.
A place where it's warm and they could play golf.
Yeah, of course. Must be nice. Oh, that's right, Peter. You were someplace nice and warm, weren't you?
I may have been in a place that rhymed with palm and golf.
Yeah, I'm in some place that rhymes with Duffalo that snowed yesterday. So anyway,
it was snowing here in Michigan today, just briefly, but
we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, so something interesting that they've added in Major League Baseball that I certainly didn't see a memo on, but it happened yesterday in the game I was watching, to point out how mostly meaningless spring training baseball is. You can now put a pitcher in a spring training game, take him out, and put him back in.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good idea because, again, sometimes they end these games prematurely because the bullpen runs out.
Right.
And people are paying money, and I don't see the harm in it. And it actually, in a way, it probably saves another guy from having to warm up and come into a game that he doesn't really need to. So I like the rule. I just didn't know that this was going on, and I bet you most people don't know, Kev.
Yeah, no, they don't. What's funny about your topic is that coming into this, I was going to broach the topic of what's more meaningless, spring training baseball games or a partial NBA score. Because
or preseason football.
So often we see, guys just have great springs, but it doesn't translate once we go north. And we also see the opposite is true as well, where guys have very poor springs, and then the season starts, and they're just their old self again. So it's hard to get a good read. I do like the fact it seems like pro sports now is all kind of choreographed, where everybody sort of knows who's going to make the team. I think that's less true in baseball. There's always like 2 or 3 roster spots, a couple bullpen spots where there's open competition for it. So top rookies are always trying to make it, and sometimes they can get there a year early. So there is some value to it. But when now in hockey, the days of guys winning the job, those are
there.
Yeah, no, it's pretty determined before everybody gets to training camp who's going to be on the team.
Feels like every couple of years one guy will sneak in now, but
so that's fair. Occasionally somebody stands out,
Yeah, but that player usually doesn't last very long. It's weird.
No, they last 9 games. We know how that works.
Yeah. When they end up in the AHL.
Yeah.
All right, I'm glad Kevin's here. I think I got an interesting topic today to discuss with you guys.
We got a bunch of them, Mac.
We got a bunch of them. You guys can, we do the board of governors, everything going on there. So we can get into that. Yeah, let's get into everything. Here we go. Hockey World. It is Wednesday, March 20th, 2024.
I'm Michael Lagello, and I'm in last place in my fantasy baseball league. Gee, I've never been there before.
I'm Pete Tessier, back from the sun in balmy Winnipeg.
Russ going from Sportsology, and it's Mike's fault that my team sucks.
Passing the buck. I'm Kevin Allen, Detroit Hockey Now, and we had snow flurries today. Not very long, but we had them here in the Detroit area.
And I'm Ekman, and you're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that brings you all the comings and goings in the hockey world.
It's more the fault of my co-general manager, by the way.
And today, happy to talk about the Hockey Buzztron 5000, which went 10-3 last night.
Wait a second. It was 2,000. Now all of a sudden it's 5,000?
We had upgraded over the weekend. So it's the Hockey Buzztron 5000. My wife and I, we paid the extra money to get the cassette player that goes with the TRS color computer. And now it's all chugging along. And so it was 10-3 yesterday, and now we are at 60% on the season so far. Exactly.
So when it goes 3-10, it'll be a Tandy 486.
Right. I mean, we did have our first losing of the year was on Sunday night. I guess we went 2-5. But besides that, it's been pretty solid. And we'll talk about the projected standings towards the end of the show, like we usually do, and the predictions for tonight. But and we do have some news. But so Mike, what do you want to go into here news wise?
Well, okay, let's start with the the Tortorella stuff, because we don't have to spend too much time on it because we talked about it yesterday. But I found it curious. No, I shouldn't find it curious because this is Torts. That after the game yesterday, he sat Sean Couturier, his team captain. He did not face the media before the game, as he would normally do. But I guess coming off the 2-game suspension and benching his team captain, he didn't want to face the fire. And then after the game, which they won barely 4-3, he wouldn't take any questions about Couturier, which is all that anybody wanted to talk to him about. It's like, okay, President Reagan, let's talk about something, but we're not going to talk about Iran-Contra. I mean, come on, what are you talking about?
Well, I mean, this is Torch, right? Like, it's not surprising at all. It's completely on theme for him. It's not, I wonder sometimes, I always having, talked to different players throughout the years, and especially talking to Tom Laidlaw about his days with Herb Brooks, I always wonder what's contrived or not. Like, I always wonder, did he go to Couturier and say, listen, I'm going to sit you down here and I'm just going to say to everybody, we're scratching you, and you can get all pissed off at the media and stuff like that. And
yeah, but it doesn't sound like that, because Russ, I mean, what Couturier said, what Dubinsky said, like go through what.
Yeah. So first thing is, I would never say put Torts and Herb Brooks together. I know Herb Brooks had a mean streak, but like Tom Laidlaw said, what he said was true and it would work.
Yeah.
As a Ranger coach, he wasn't like John was as a Ranger coach. I wouldn't really put them in the same breath.
For sure.
But the other thing is, there were two things. So Brandon Dubinsky played with him for the Rangers, played with him in Columbus. He did exist under John, right? So people always say some players love John, and that's true, and some don't. But yesterday we saw the ones that don't. They decided to speak up and say that this act is getting old. And I went so far as to say it's a gimmick. Because at this point, when you know that Sean Couturier was 2 years removed from playing in hockey and he's trying his best, and they didn't manage his time at all during the year, which they should have. We talked about it before the season began.
Right.
You know that sitting him is just going to piss off the team, and there's a 50-50 chance it's going to work. And that 4-3 win was as thin as a thin win could be. And honestly, it affected the team, and I'll tell you how. Fourth period. I almost said fourth period. Third period, a minute to go in the game. There's a big face-off in the Flyers' end, and John Tavares comes out, and he sends Scott Lawton out. And Scott Lawton was 34% on face-offs that game. And that's Sean Couturier's spot. But he sent it to Scott Lawton. Lawton loses the face-off. It goes right back to the Leafs. The shot goes on net. Another shot goes on net. It almost goes in and ties it. It doesn't. And then the game's over. So just what John did it wasn't just a one thing. It affected the team positively and negatively. But nobody likes to point out the negative part because they say, oh, look, see, you just got to win in the standings. But the Leafs hit 5 posts. Like, that's why you got to win.
And Kev, I pointed this out to Russ, and this is my issue with Torts, is Couturier is a player who's coming off a major injury. And Torts doesn't seem to care. Essentially, it's like he's available, so I'm going to wear him into the ground and play him 24 minutes a night. It's sort of like the Billy Martin effect when it came to pitchers when he was with Oakland in the 80s. I'm going to throw this guy 300 innings so they blow out their arms, but I don't give a crap as long as I get the victory.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. Number one, I think Tortorella is one of his big issues is that, I treat everybody the same, whether the captain of the Star or the fourth liner. And that is, if you're not living up to my standards, you'll pay a price for that.
Sure.
And I do think the players sort of appreciate that. They like the idea that even the top players are held accountable and they're just not, benching a fourth liner when things aren't going right. So I think there's that players do appreciate it. I think there are more players who like Tortorella than don't. Mm-hmm. The second thing, but the problem is it's all in his presentation. He doesn't seem to care, how much tension he causes by the way he does things. And how many times did we see on Twitter from people that a lot of us respect, we're saying, look, got no problem with his decision to, not use Couturier, but it's just how he did it. And I think that's always been the issue, and that's what causes them the problem. And so maybe that aspect of it is this gimmick. Is that
I think you're right on that. I also think that he actually is one of the coaches who likes being the story.
Yes, he does. Yeah,
and I think that that's something that a lot of coaches, only take on the story when they feel like it'll take the pressure away from their team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in the way he does not comment.
Right.
Like, we all have met, and let's face it, and I have fought these battles with reporters who get in beefs with individual players. And, the issue is, that players are obligated to come to an interview, but they're not obligated to speak about subjects they don't want to talk about. And the same is true for coaches. Like, he doesn't have to talk to you about what he does with his players, but he needs to come. So he probably fulfilled his obligation. But the problem is most coaches who have been in that situation don't want to talk about it, come in and they do it in a cordial manner. Right. And he doesn't. He wants that tension. He dares you to ask him so that he can be gruff. And there's really no reason for it other than he wants to create, kind of a scene, and he wants to be the tough coach. So where he could just say, look, that's just not a subject. That's between me and the player. I think it should be private. That's just how I feel about it. You say it in that way, then the reporter looks like a schmuck if they keep pursuing it. Right. But he doesn't do that. He wants to intimidate you and do everything else. So, I mean, that's just the way he's always been.
Couturier's agent complained. Couturier's agent complained, and Danny Briere was asked about it, and he said it's solely John Tortorella's decision, which is not getting a lot of support from the GM.
And Peter, and honestly, when I heard that, it's like, okay, he's on an island here. It's like when Briere comes out and says, well, because I asked Russ, I mean, was Couturier being selected team captain a Torts decision, a team decision, or a management decision? Because if management decided they're going to name Couturier captain, and then 32 days later, a healthy Couturier is benched, Torts is on an island right now.
Or do they even care? Like, I mean, this is the point. Like, at some point, you either have to let the coach himself into a corner, or you have to let him coach himself out of the corner. And Torts goes in and out of corners more often than Kyle Connor does on the forecheck. Like, it's, that's who he is. Like, when you bring Tortorella into your organization, you take it all, because you never know what's going to consistently come. So as an ownership group, as a management group, you have to be prepared for all of those things. Yeah. And if you're not going to stand behind him at his best or at his worst, you might not get his best either. You got to think
about that piece. I talked to somebody who dealt with Tort. I talked to him today, a friend of mine in the game who's dealt with Torts a lot, and who was around Torts a ton in his career. And I asked him about the Danny Briere thing, and he said, "This is what Tortorella will do." He said Danny probably Danny hears about. This is all just speculation, by the way. So I don't know anything from talking to Dan. I did not talk to Briere about this or anything like that. So he's sitting there and he's saying, okay, Danny might call him up and says, you're scratching Couturier. I'm not, that's not I don't think you really think that's a good move. He's a captain, He's, we're playing against, this is a really big important win. I'm not going to back you on this one, and then Tortorella will say, fine. I don't expect you to back me on it. It's not, it's not your job to back me. He really doesn't care if management backs him as much as some of the other coaches do. So to him, it's all about the now. Like, he is all about what's happening right now, where a lot of coaches, look towards the future more. He doesn't really do that. So putting him in a situation of a team that's rebuilding, like the Flyers, that isn't about the now, is the dichotomy we've all talked about. We've all talked about that many times. It's like, okay, they're doing things for the now, but they're trying to build towards the future.
Yeah, but it may not have been necessary. My point and my bone of contention here is it may not have been necessary to bench Couturier at this point because he hasn't been playing well if you hadn't have worn him down and played him ridiculous minutes early in the season. I mean, this is a guy who's coming off a major injury. Okay, he's not, playing him on the fourth line is an embarrassment, which is what they did the last few games before they sat him. Okay, who's at fault for that? Is it Couturier, or is it the fact that they were playing him 24 minutes a night for a long stretch?
I don't blame Torch for that. I mean,
What do you mean you don't?
You have to blame him.
You have to.
I'm saying
Okay,
if Couturier is in your lineup, no, what I mean by that, and I'm not that I don't blame him for some of that, okay? But what I mean by that is, if Couturier is in your lineup, you got to play him like you're going to play Sean Couturier. You can't sit back and say we're gonna ease him.
But he's not a 21-year-old Sean Couturier who's completely healthy.
Hold on a second. There's a bigger issue there. There's two ways of being fit to play. You are or you're not.
Right.
That's it.
That's what I'm saying.
That's it. And that goes into a team of medical professionals who advise the player, the coach, and the GM. A player is nothing more than an asset. You have an organization that spends millions of dollars on people, research, equipment, access to medical training, all the necessary things to manage those assets to the best of their ability. If the player says he's good and he's fit, he's approved medically, he's good, he's fit, then he's fit. If he isn't, he shouldn't be playing because you're only going to damage your asset.
That's where I'm at.
There are players who will go out and play injured. They all play somewhat injured, but they're fit. Mm-hmm. The extreme cases always happen in the postseason, right? Where someone's got a hairline crack in a bone or worse, and they drug it up, they wrap it up, and they know just get through, go as long as you can. We need you. This is the holy grail. And that's where the exceptions are made. If Couturier is getting ground down at 24 minutes, then there's a bigger issue at play, and it's not because of him. He's either got it's a system thing. It's what the coach sees. And if he and Torts are talking and he's like,
well, they're not talking. That's the other thing.
Well, then there's the other issue, right?
He's the captain.
Yeah. I don't really, I actually I do not believe that the NHL comes down to either you're fit or you're not. I mean, it's the one sport where, as you mentioned, players are routinely injured in play. So it's just a matter of where you're at in terms of your injury. But even in the regular season, it is more pronounced, obviously, in the postseason. But in the regular season, I mean, how many conversations have members of the media, talking to the guys, especially in the old days, less so now. But, what are you at? Well, I'm playing at about 70%. Yeah. Guys come back 4 to 6 months from an ACL. But through the years, I've interviewed people, and you're never quite the same for like a year.
Right.
Even though you're back and you're healthy enough to play, and you're not, you're not causing further injury by playing, but you're not the same player. It just takes longer to come back and than the 4 to 6 month rehab at all. But one of the things that we haven't talked about, which is the issue that allows Tortorella to do these things and not face any ramifications, is he's done a remarkable job of keeping this team competitive.
Yeah. Sure.
And the other issue is, and we circled it, but we didn't bring it up. John's 65 years old. He's not going to change his ways. And secondly, he doesn't worry about it. He's not worried about what he's going to, if he's going to offend Danny Briere, because, he's not going to be the coach. And he's never really worried about that. But, I remember the stories about Tortorella. Jay Feaster once told me about when he had problems with Vinny Lecavalier. Mm-hmm. And Lecavalier couldn't stand him. He couldn't stand Lecavalier. And Feaster called him in the office and said, here's the problem, guys, because I'm not moving Lecavalier and I'm not firing Tortorella. So you guys got to learn how to coexist, or else you're going to be miserable all the time.
Yeah.
If I have to get in the middle of it, I will.
And he's got 2 years left in a contract no matter what. So if Briere decides to fire him, he's still got 2 years left in a contract. I want to move to this one because when the pronouncement from Bill Daly came out this morning, of course I went from 0 to a billion on the Richter scale, because Daly pretty much didn't say 100%, but pretty much said that no matter what happens with this auction deal in Arizona, that the Coyotes will be playing at Mullet Arena next year. And I'm literally just beating my head against the wall because this is a total and utter embarrassment to this league. And I understand, Kev, I understand the reasons why they want to stay there. Big TV market. There's, I'm sure if things were straightened out, building, ownership, everything was on the same page, that this would be a place where a lot of players would want to go to. It would be a successful franchise. But it hasn't been that in 15 years. So I have no problem. I think that the course of action that should be is they should be moved out of Arizona. And then once Arizona straightens out all their problems and they got a building and they got this and they got that, great. Then we go back as an expansion team. But how many more years are they going to string us along with this bull crap?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've crossed over with you. I mean, I'm siding with you on that. Like, this should have been resolved long ago. But, I knew once we got into the spring, we've talked about this before, but you couldn't possibly move a team right now. Yeah. There's way too much. I mean, I've gone through it before, and as explained to me by, team presidents, that, it takes 2 to 3 months to hire a team. You've got to mount a sales campaign. You couldn't do that. We're almost to April. You couldn't do that at April and be ready to go in September. It's just not going to happen. So they waited too long.
Sell 5,000 seats a night on eBay.
Here's the problem. You don't want to get into the same situation you had in Arizona. You want to be able to go to a place where you're going to get off to a great start and commit to that and do all that. Now, again, they haven't done that. That's the problem.
Right.
So I don't know what to make of it. It's a messy. They really want to do that, but I still think it comes down to the expansion money. Like if they really do want to go to Utah and back to Atlanta, they're looking at I think Gary Bettman has said on the record talking about $2 billion, or at least some people think that he's looking to do that. And that's what this is all about. You don't get that kind of money on a transfer.
No, well, Peter, let me ask you this: when it went from Atlanta to Winnipeg, I will agree with what Kevin is saying, that you have to assemble a ticket sales and season ticket base and all this other thing. I don't remember Winnipeg hitting the ground running.
They had everything in place. That's why they went to Winnipeg.
I was going to write, back when I was still writing, a long story about the history of all the little events that kind of became clear long after.
Okay.
Some very interesting things that happened among some people who were in the know before this happened.
Okay.
There were some different things with media. There were some different things it was just very fascinating when you can look back with 2020 hindsight.
Okay.
Kevin's absolutely right. If the NHL is going to move the Coyotes, they know they're going to get pounded for what took you so long and blah, blah, blah. And they know they can't get it wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. And so Kevin's 100% right. You need to have everything set, and they may not be able to do it by June. Winnipeg had a professional AHL team playing here already.
Mm-hmm.
They already had the ticketing infrastructure, they had an organization. It just wasn't NHL level.
Right.
It also were 15 minutes away the year before with Arizona, ironically. They had everything in place.
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen. You've got to bring people in who, you're going to have to do talent hires. You may not take everyone with the Coyotes who's there. They may not want to go. There's a lot going on there. So you need to lock it down. You need to have things so set in place before, because you've got, just think about that. What if the Coyotes made the playoffs and were in it and they're about to move, and when you're trying to do an announcement and such, you've got to have this ready. I wouldn't be surprised if they say Mullet Arena next year. Behind the scenes, they know it's shut down, and next year is just it's set in stone by the time the season starts, and by about mid-March, it's out.
Well, here's the thing. All right, I'm going to bring up a thing that won't happen but I think we're closer to having it happen again. And that is, what if they win the lottery? So what if they win the lottery? Macklin Celebrini could go back to college. He could be like, you know what? NHL, when you figure this out, then I'll think about it. But I can go back to college. Maybe I won't make a lot on my NIL, but I'll play and I'll have another great season and I'll be the number 1 or number 2 pick next year. And I don't want to play for them.
Well, no, they would just retain his rights because Owen Power went.
Right, but he could force them to trade his rights too.
Well, maybe he could be the Caleb Williams of the NHL. He could do that.
Well, let me just go back because I do know quite a bit about what happened in Atlanta, and this is the difference. And one of the things they have to consider about it. I mean, Bettman is truthful when he says he hates moving franchises. And people always point to Atlanta, but Atlanta was a special circumstances because the owners there were the problem. The owners didn't want the team anymore. Most of them were involved, really didn't even want to be involved in the first place. And they did everything but try to give the keys back to Gary Bettman to the arena. And Don Waddell, essentially, and this is why the league has always appreciated Waddell, he sort of kept it all together. And in Gary Bettman's mind, he knew, as Peter just pointed out, they had a structure in place. They had a season ticket list. They had, sponsors. They had an arena. It wasn't, the size that you like necessarily, but they had it all there. And he knew he could move that smoothly. And he also knew it was in Canada where, there wasn't going to be a problem with selling tickets. They were going to be in love, with the NHL. So he had that ace and all. That's why he moved so quickly, where all of a sudden, on a Tuesday, they're saying, yeah, we're going to go. And why, it's taken so long in Arizona, because he really doesn't want to move it. Because he likes the idea of the television market. And, they sell the television rights based on the size of the markets they have and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not exonerating him because this has been a mess beyond belief. But I'm just saying that's how we got to this perspective. But Russ is also right. I mean, that could, be a problem. I mean, if the guy doesn't want to go there. So.
Now, I want to just ask this to Kevin because I have to say that, and it's not a guarantee right now because they're only a point up for the last playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. But if the Detroit Red Wings somehow hold on and earn a playoff spot this year, the signing of Patrick Kane might be the sole reason, because now they've lost 8 of the last 10 games. He scored the game-winning goal against Buffalo, which was probably the biggest, I think, at that point after they had lost 7 games in a row. And then last night, after Lucas Raymond ties it with, I think, 12 seconds left to go, Kane scores the game-winning goal in overtime. I'm not saying they're going to hold on, Kevin, but that signing right now is one of the things that is keeping that team above water.
Well, I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, I think they do want to re-sign him, and he's just really been a special player, since he's come back from this injury. I wouldn't say he's been the best player. There's really one guy who, in the midst of, up until 12.6 seconds to go, it looked like the Red Wings were going to lose 9 out of 10.
Yep.
And then Raymond scored, and then Kane scored in overtime, and of course they won the thing. But Lucas Raymond, in the midst of all this, has just been a beast. He has 7 goals in his last 5 games. He has scored in 5 consecutive games, and he's out muscling people for the puck. He's just playing extremely well. But the problem is the Red Wings only have like 3 players that are playing even reasonably well. It's Kane and Raymond and Moritz Seider, and the rest of it's been, just been disastrous. And yesterday, for the first time on talk radio, there was a discussion about whether Derek Lalonde would be fired if he didn't win that game last night. Wow. I don't think that was going to happen. But as the host of the radio show pointed out, Lane Lambert also was a second-year coach and got fired for similar circumstances, that just not believe that they could take him over the top. This morning, and it's not a website that I recognize, but there's a story out there about whether Steve Yzerman would be fired. Right. Now, again, I don't think that'll happen. The Ilitch family is pretty committed to Steve Yzerman, but just the fact that you see that sort of speaks to, the angst that the fans feel here. I mean, they don't have any right based on what's happening with the Buffalo Sabres a dozen years without the playoffs. And, the Red Wings have only been out 7 in comparison, but you can feel that the fans have been very disappointed by this level of play. And they were in a string here of 5 games against non-playoff teams. The win against Columbus is only the second win that they've had in those 5 games. So
yeah.
So I have to bring this up, Eck. My favorite sign, which is starting to look like it's prophetic based on the way that the New York Islanders have played recently, because they lose a game to Ottawa, they lose a game to Buffalo last Thursday, they got trounced by the New York Rangers on Sunday, and then they lose again to Carolina. Now there's some good teams in there,
a lot of good teams in there, Mike.
Right? No, but they're losing it. Patrick Waugh comes out and sort of scolds Ilya Sorokin, which I'm sorry. It's like, okay, I understand you're a Hall of Fame goaltender, but you should understand the perspective of a goaltender, that you don't undercut the confidence of a goaltender. You just don't do it. And that's what he did. And I mean, that team is a one-line team with 3 defensemen, and they don't know how to play defense anymore. They've lost their identity. They really
obviously, yeah. I mean, obviously they're not as bad as, like we talked about before, they've lost more 1-goal games than anybody in the NHL by a lot. They've been in games. They battle. They don't score enough. Sorokin, is not something that you're going to pick on very often, for sure. He has struggled though. And Varlamov does deserve to get games in there. There's no question about it. And Varlamov, you got to remember that this is one of the better goalie combinations in the league. I mean, these are 2 really serious goalies. I mean, Varlamov's anybody would love to have Varlamov as their backup. I mean, he's not the problem. So, but at the end of the day, it really looks like when you run all the numbers that, 2 of the 3 teams are Washington, the Islanders, and Philly are going to make the playoffs. 2 of those 3 teams are going to make the playoffs. How they, one of them is going to finish 3rd, and one of them might grab the last wild card spot. So, and there's every reason to believe that the Islanders have every bit as good of a chance as the Flyers or the Capitals to make the playoffs. There's no reason to think that, my projection does have them finishing in 3rd ahead of, but that's only 1 point ahead of the Flyers and 2 points ahead of the Capitals right now. So it's all so muffled. But to say it's over for the Islanders is ridiculous. I mean, it's just not over for the Islanders.
The Capitals are probably the best story. I mean, this is they've hoisted the white flag. They've dumped some salaries. They were sellers, and
right
since then they've played well. Ovechkin actually has picked it up. Has had some goals, and it looks like he's fully committed. And they're in pretty good shape, all things considered.
And one of the bigger stories is Lindgren has been like,
has
been ridiculous. And no one talks about it. He is the reason when you watch the Capitals or you talk to Capitals fans, he's the reason they're in the playoffs right now. It's Lindgren that's keeping him in the playoffs.
Spencer Carberry is going to get some Jack Adams votes
for sure, and deserves them.
Which is so that team is an interesting team, and I think Tortorella looks at these 2 teams that he's going against for this playoff spot and sees 2 teams that are vastly more experienced than his team. Has teams 2, the Islanders and the Capitals have been through the wars a lot more than the players and the Flyers have been.
Yeah, but funny thing, like I said yesterday, you wouldn't have known, but Ross Mahoney and his crew in Washington, they developed their young players. So Miroshchenko's up there, and you have 2 or 3 other young guys that are contributing. LaPierre has contributed during the year. The other center, I'm forgetting his name right now. He's 14 goals.
Connor McMichael?
Yeah, McMichael has 14 goals. They brought him up the right way.
Yeah.
So they're using their youth too, and their youth is helping them.
They are, and there's a lot of interesting things that have happened, in this whole race since then. And the other is that the Carolina Hurricanes are suddenly looking like they're the best team in the Metro Division.
Well, Jake Ensel does help.
I mean, and and Kuznetsov too. I mean, they both have been like really good for them. And the reality is, they were already very good. And here you're sitting with a team. The Hurricanes have a serious shot, of winning this division. Very.
I mean, Gensel had a 3-point game. It was hard to not notice that because a lot of Hurricanes don't get 3-point games.
Yeah, and I think that there's the trade of Gensel just looks like a really big tragic flaw from the Pittsburgh Penguins point of view. Like there's really
okay. Not to be put in the position of defending Kyle Dubas, but if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins, you had to make that trade. You either get him signed to a long-term extension or you trade him. Now, you could quibble about whether they got enough value for him based on what he's been doing with Carolina since. We know he's a good player, but they got a good forward in return in Bunting. They got 3 prospects, and they got a draft pick that can turn into a first-round pick. That's not a bad return, Ack. And they could, if you're going to re-sign Gensel, re-sign him in the summer. You got 5 assets for him, and you could re-sign him.
Well, the only reason that they traded him, I think, is that Gensel knows where he wants to go, and they know it's not there. I think at the end of the day, they have to trade him. But whether or not they got enough for him or not, I don't think they did. And I think that the reality is that they're.
Well, remember, Dubas did not want future. He could have made the deal that because apparently the deal that the Rangers offered him was Othman or Perreault and a number 1. He could have made that deal, and instead he made a deal because he's under the constraints of he's got an older core and he needs to bring in players that are immediate, not players that are going to be there in 2 or 3 years. Because in 2 or 3 years they're going to be in a rebuild one way or the other. So he's under sort of strict. Not orders, but under a situation where he's got to have players that come in the next year or so, and some of these players might be able to. Let's
talk about some GM meeting stuff too, real quick.
Go ahead.
The whole concept of the 3-on-3 overtime has been discussed. It seems like it's not going to be changed.
Unfortunately.
But I did like the fact that they were throwing the floating blue line around, and it's definitely like if anybody who's played deck hockey or whatever, street hockey knows the concept of the floating red line, of the floating blue line.
I'm pro tie. I want ties back.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I mean, to me, the answer here is clear as day, and they'll just never do it. Is the 3-point for a regulation win is the answer?
They're never going to do it, Ack.
I'll tell you the one I'm going to vote for. And I'm the one who never wants delays in games. I want to see the coaches starting to vote for whether they want to say that it's an over-the-glass penalty or not.
Yeah, the goal. Now, the question is, with the goalie challenge for the puck over the glass, do they get a 2-minute penalty if they're wrong?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh.
I want to see that. I want to see that instituted, and I'll tell you why. It's a measure of revenge because that's been a coaching strategy for the last 5 years for some teams, just getting guys to blindly do it, whether it makes sense or not. And sometimes it goes over, and a lot of times it doesn't. And we've noticed now, too, in different arenas, they're not all the same the way the glass is on the bench anymore. Some have it a little bit shorter where the bench starts. So,
first of all, there's got to be uniformity when it comes to the glass, Kev. And then second of all, if they're going to call challenges, they're going to have cameras, more cameras around the rink to be able to tell whether it's over or not.
Yep. No, they will. I mean, for sure. But I mean, and the problem is you're still going to have challenges where it's going to be inconclusive.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it's inconclusive, do you still get the penalty?
That's my question.
So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, but what I do like, because this has come a long way, was the fact that, at least they're not talking about getting rid of the rule, because people have forgotten what a mess it used to be when guys would just fire the puck out whenever there was pressure.
Yeah.
And I just hated that, because they teach, 7-year-old soccer players to do that. Whenever you get in trouble, just knock it out of bounds. And we had pro defensemen that, or the goalies. You would see it, and they would just lift it out whenever there was, pressure if they could. So I'm glad that we're going to keep that rule in, and we're just now sort of tinkering with the edges.
Am I remembering this wrong though, Kevin? When I was younger, wasn't the goalies a penalty though? If the goalie was,
it was.
That's the one that was actually that was called, right?
But instead, Peter, now what we get is when the puck goes over the glass, you got 20 players on one team going, hey!
Yeah, for sure.
The biggest problem with a lot of the rules the NHL focuses on is it's not focusing on the technology and ways to enforce them accurately and efficiently. So what they do is they get caught up on principles, and this is just a historical problem with the NHL. They don't want to tinker and like the fact that they even got to 3-on-3 is actually kind of a miracle, given the legacy thinking in that organization.
Oh yeah.
But if you think about the little things that matter, they've got the opportunity to change some things that would so dramatically affect the experience of the game and how fans look at it, and they just stay away from them. The biggest driver they could do is change interference calls. They won't touch it.
No, they won't touch that.
But it's this. This is the part that makes the sport lag behind others and draws. And they have no problem of refs spending 5 minutes looking at iffy reviews on offsides that would never have affected the outcome of the play by a toe length, right? But they won't
invest less of those now. I think that's a lot. It's dropped a lot.
Yeah, they've gotten pretty good at that. But I mean, to me, the biggest problem that they're not addressing.
You're going to add another confusing thing where you need the technology to review it. It could be who the play stands on the ice. They're not thinking about the experience and what it looks like. And how it affects game flow, how it affects fan experience, how it affects trust, and how it affects gambling.
Well, here's
and
what
they've got to start thinking about that.
Yeah.
They're trying to make much money off of gambling, and they have things in the game that absolutely affect it in ways that are inconceivable. And the second you start disrupting the gambling flow and trust, people will stop betting on the games, and it's going to happen. Gamblers, the smart ones, learn.
Here's what I would say. Especially in football and definitely in hockey, these sports want to be offensive, and they've changed rules to do that, right?
Sure.
So when you're playing on defense, it's all a measure of what's barely legal or not. Like what defensive backs do in football is just a clever way of holding half the time so they won't get called. So, I mean, you can't take away every vice that a defenseman has in hockey, but I agree. I see at least three interference calls a game that don't get called. I see the guy who referee.
Brian
McCabe chips the puck one way, he skates the other, and you can stand in front of him.
It's 50% better than it was in the 80s. I mean, it's like that's the crazy thing about it.
Just in the 80s.
No. I mean, let's say I'm going to say the 90s. I should say the 90s. Like the New Jersey Devils, for a while there, they taught everybody how to hold up every player in interference, and
the Wild are the same
for a long
way.
time.
Remember, and the Wild are the same way, and we all know. And they adjusted the rules to deal with it. The goal scoring's up, things are up, but it's a false positive because it's not quite a trend yet. A trend has got to go on for 3 or 4 seasons and be meaningful. It's up this year for sure. Fantastic. However, one of the reasons that was talked about a long time ago is, what we saw a ton of after they really cracked down interference after the lockout season of 2005. Remember when it came back?
Oh, yeah.
Injuries. The players weren't ready to deal with coming in with speed. So they let this nonsense go that prevents offense. They've adapted to that now. And it slowly comes back. It's ridiculous. But people are paying to see Nylander, McKinnon, Pettersson, McDavid, Draisaitl, Stone rip the puck, go down the wing, come across, razzle-dazzle, not have some guy draped all over him or stand in front because he chipped the puck the other way. Like, it's little things like that, and they just don't want to touch it. I think
nobody cheers a defenseman for a great
goal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's true. I mean, you guys know my issue is, and I think that I talked to 2 of the GMs before they went in, and I said, can this possibly be addressed? And they just don't address it ever, is this concept of, that we have coaches' challenges in the last 5 minutes of a game, or especially in the playoffs, or in playoff overtime, something like that. To me, we need to follow the NFL here and say that we need to get it right at certain points of the game, regardless. Right. And we can't have a coach like risking going down 2 men to just try to get it right in a playoff game. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. That we've seen it happen, and it's just horrendous. That risk is out there. It really is obnoxious, I think, and it's going to happen in some real big way at some point where a coach is afraid to challenge because he would have put his team down 2 players, but the replay is going to show that if he challenged, he would have won. The NHL just doesn't want to get it right, and it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a huge issue at some point. It's waiting to explode. Do you agree with that, Kevin, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that discussed before. The fear of the penalty for getting it wrong is great. That you hear that occasionally. Yeah. So, but there, the fear is that if there was not a penalty, everybody would challenge everything, and the game would be worse. So
I don't think that's true. I don't think that, and I think that if it is true, let that be the case, but still have a point at which in the NFL, right? There's a point at which in the NFL that the challenge that you don't have to challenge plays, that anything.
Yeah, the league takes it over, and I forget how many minutes are left.
Yeah,
Russ, do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the answer.
Why is that not the case in the NHL? Like, why would we not do that? Can't think of any reason why we wouldn't want to do that. I could see, like you said, throughout the game, okay, maybe, but at that point, it's kind of happening. I don't get that at all. One of the things I wanted to discuss before we get out of here is, the concept of MVP, because I've had this debate with a bunch of people recently about the MVP in the league this year, and my feeling is that there's so many possibilities this year. It's really wide open. I feel
okay.
And a lot of people don't think it is.
No, I don't think it is at all. I mean, because I was advocating that the possibility that Matthews might have a case for the Hart had he maintained his 70-goal pace. He's not. Shows the value of Mitch Marner, who's been out for a couple weeks. McDavid has they've made a great run after being the worst team or one of the worst teams in the league the first 2 months. It's McKinnon. McKinnon. It's been McKinnon by a long shot. It's Secretariat in the Belmont. It's McKinnon.
Listen, I mean, I'm not taking away from McKinnon's season at all, and it probably is McKinnon. But at the end of the day, the fact that this rule is still like, as you know, Kevin, so well because you were involved in this so many years, that it is the player that's most valuable to his team. Right. Is the literal definition of that award. It's hard to go away from Kucherov to me. And it's like, and the reality is like that is, if you go by definition, I mean, you have Makar, you have Rantanen, and you have
Hellebuck.
Right. Well, who's this?
Hellebuck.
Hellebuck is another one too. Yeah. And I mean, every team, to what I've been talking about recently, and what I'd like to do at some point with you guys is go through who is the actual most valuable player for each team. Because I think that is an interesting thing to go through, because you go through it and you find different players. Go ahead.
I was going to say, to that point of Hellebuck, I saw this the other week, and I don't know who did it. I give them credit. I wish I knew. It might have been Garrett Hull. They showed what would have happened if Hellebuck had played to the league average goaltending percentage for the Jets in terms of goals, more goals allowed and everything. Figured it all out. It's a pretty telling stat.
Yeah.
Like they're maybe scraping 8th place.
Yeah. No, he's been incredible.
It's been incredible. And I think, he won't win the Hart. I think who was the last one to win it? Theodore?
Yes.
Theodore, right? And because
before him Hasek.
Yeah. And I just don't think that's in the cards anymore or available.
Not.
But it should be something that's thought about in a different sense, or you have to change the definition.
You really should change the definition, because the reality is I don't
think you should change it. I mean, here's what I would say. Maybe this won't happen, but McKinnon's got a chance to go 50-100. And the only 2 players to do it in NHL history are Lemieux and Gretzky did it 8 times.
50-100, 50 goals and 100 points?
I mean, it's
100 assists.
It's hard to argue that he's the best player.
Assists and 8 goals.
Yeah.
He's the best player for that, for sure.
That's way better than Kucherov. It's not even close.
No, but you can take him away from Colorado, and Colorado still makes the playoffs. If you take away from
that? I don't know.
I mean, if we're going to do that, isn't it Hellebuck? And just for the
It very well could be. I mean, that's why I think there's a lot of players out there who have arguments here.
Up until 2 weeks ago, had you taken McKinnon off Colorado, as you just said, their number 1 center would have been Ryan Johansson. They wouldn't be They wouldn't be a playoff team without
a playoff team still.
No way.
No. You don't need a number 1 center to be a playoff team. I mean, it's like they
Sure
are.
you do.
Not when you have McCarr and Rantanen. I mean, you have you have superstars on that team.
The Leafs missed the playoffs 12 of 13 years from 2004 to 2017. Why? Because in now 13 years they didn't have a number one center.
Heck, he's got 42 goals and 75 assists, right?
I am not taking
hold on. If I was a math major and figured out what his share of team scoring is, it's pretty damn high. It's probably it could be higher than Kucherov, even with the season he's having, just based on your metric.
But he's also playing with McCarr and Rantanen. I mean, it's but
it's not like the Lightning.
Braden Point. There's great players Kucherov's with. Stop.
Yeah, I mean they've got terrific players.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't want to hear that.
No, I'm not saying this is clear cut. I'm not saying that deserves it beyond a shadow of a doubt.
I think he's in the conversation. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think he really.
If I have a vote this year, Kucherov will be in my top 5, no doubt.
Yeah.
Will he be number 1? Not a chance in hell.
No, I mean, McKinnon's the best player in the league.
Yes.
We're not going to turn away from that. I mean, I'm not turning away from that. Like in the other award, which is voted on by the players, the Lindsay Award, whatever, McKinnon should win it. Clearly should win it.
I mean, the problem is that even though it says exactly the way that you phrased it, most valuable to his team, I mean, everybody sort of views MVP and in so many different ways. Like like most people in their own mind, even though there are no rules that say a non-playoff guy couldn't be MVP,
right?
They tell themselves, you got to be on a playoff team in order to make it. So everybody sort of applies their own kind of set of rules to it, and I think when you factor in that people think McKinnon is the best player in the NHL this season, and then you factor in the team he's playing for and how he fits and how he makes that team go, and that's why he's maybe has an advantage over Kucherov.
Oh yeah, no, he still might, but to me it's not. It's the clear cutness of it that sort of.
Here's the other thing, and I just looked up the stat. I'll look it up for Kucherov. McKinnon's had 143 shots blocked too. Imagine if that was last year. In all last year, it was 149. So they're going out of their way to block his shots.
I mean, he's incredible. He's an incredible player, and and quite often the most valuable player is not the player you think of. The most valuable player to the team. Like I was going through I was going through my list, and I went to Detroit, and to me, I was like, well, I think probably that's Dylan Larkin, but I don't know if I'm right about that, Kevin, or not. But it feels like when Larkin goes out, the team doesn't do well.
Well, I mean, that's certainly the case now. I mean, I think they're 4-11 without him.
So is he the most valuable player?
Kucherov has more, 157 blocks against. So they're blocking him too.
Yeah, I mean, Kucherov has had an amazing.
He has.
I mean, and there's a lot of players who have. I mean, we're in an amazing era right now. It's not like there aren't a lot of players who deserve to look at. And obviously Hellebuck is right up there too. There's no question about it. He's definitely put in the work too. I still think we're gonna we're still I just to me it's just everyone just shuts it down so quickly, and I'm like, wait a second, we should talk about some of these other guys.
I mean, I think your top 3 are going to be McDavid, McKinnon, and Kucherov, and I think that's a fair group. I don't think there's a bad player in there. I would say this though, because Oilers fans, they're a sensitive bunch, and they tend to sort of have this belief that when you get a generational type player that fits in the Gretzky, Lemieux, or that there's a special, I guess, a special thing that comes with that, and the player gets a certain type of a treatment. And I think the reason that I take McDavid out of those 3 and put him a little bit of a tier below is some would say, well, look at who Kucherov has and look at who McKinnon has with them. And I go, exactly. He's still doing it even when there's other people around to do it. McDavid's got Draisaitl, and Hyman, and that's it.
That's a lot.
He should be the leader on the team, and he should be running away with it.
Oh, that's true.
There's literally no one else. They've got Bouchard on defense and Ekholm's a shell of himself. As a collective, they work. But there's literally 2 other people on there who you would go out of your way to trade for, because you sure as hell wouldn't trade for Nurse.
All right, Eck, I've got it. I'm sorry, Peter.
And that's the point that I think you have to make.
Yeah.
David and Kucherov are doing this with extraordinary talent around them and still finding ways to be head and shoulders above everyone night after night after night.
This is sad to say that I'm actually more positive about the Oilers than Peter is.
Yeah, here's what I have: the definitive win in McKinnon's corner right now.
Okay.
3 more game-winning goals. He averages more than a minute of ice time than Kucherov. So he's over 22 minutes. He's 22.53, and Kucherov's like 21 and change. So 22.53 is a lot, man.
That's crazy.
And the acquisition of Casey Middlestad as the number 2. Remember, he has been playing with no legitimate number 2 center. He's drawing the top defensive guy every top defensive pairing every game. There's nobody to take the heat off of him because usually he's playing with Rantanen. I'm sorry. He's putting up the points that he's putting up. To me, he's running away with it.
I had this discussion with a bunch of people down in Palm Springs last week, and we were talking. It was actually Sunday evening. We were talking about that overtime winning goal that McKinnon set up. I mean, alone to have the wherewithal to do that with 3.5 seconds left was incredidable.
Yeah.
But the tape-to-tape pass was otherworldly incredible. But here's the difference between McDavid and McKinnon. McDavid will go around you. If he's coming down at you, you're basically prepared to have your underwear on your head.
And McKinnon will go through you.
McKinnon will go around you, go through you, go over you, or go under you. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
And that's why I like, and here's another way of looking at it. And they're all having amazing seasons. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not really anti McDavid as much as I'm anti Oilers. If you had to line those 3 players up and say, those are all in a draft class based on what you've seen this year, which one do you pick? There's an interesting question. They all become
McKinnon, because I know McDavid will get more points, but I know McKinnon will do other things in the game, the occasional check, the other little things that McDavid doesn't have to do.
That's tough because McKinnon's a few years older than McDavid. So
Kucherov's older than him.
And Kucherov's older than him. So
right, but imagine those 3 and what we know about them. How would you pick them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing,
it's
right?
a very interesting topic. Well, that's all the time we have for today, folks. By the way, I would mention the really quickly. I would talk about the predictions for tonight's game on the podcast, and I will do that real quick. I'm sorry about that. I messed this up. I was doing this. Bring them up right now. We only have 3 games tonight. The NHL, this is just crazy that like 13.
We can only lose 3 tonight.
Yeah, Tuesdays and Thursdays it's like 14 games every night, but then every other day it's 3.
So tonight, the Buzztron 5000 has Maple Leafs over the Capitals in regulation, the Stars over the Coyotes in regulation, and the Wild over the Kings in overtime. So we'll see how this plays out. But here's
my commentary on the show.
And what's the record so far?
We are now at 60%. So we have 39 wins. 39 wins and 25 losses so far this season. So
I hope you're betting on FanDuel.
60%. Exactly 60%. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey, guys. We will talk to you all soon.
Sorry.